Shavua Tov. Today I am planning to talk just a bit about numbers in the Torah, and really that's a long subject, and we talk about a lot of things that have to do with numbers, but I just wanted to look at it in one vignette from reading Parshat Bamidbar and Parshat Naso in the last few weeks. And that really is just to say, in brief, that there are instances where I think it's very hard to argue that the number that the Torah has chosen has nothing to do with a kind of message for you about the numerical properties of the number, and just has to do with a dry, uninteresting happenstance of fact of exactly what this number was a long time ago. And it's not interesting other than that it's trying to record and be factually accurate. Now, of course, Kadosh Baruch Hu has total freedom if he wants to make it so that the dry and interesting fact also is a number that happens to contain a pattern message. And so it's not really either or, but I think it's more like, why does the Torah bother to tell us numbers at all? And I think that one should go so far to say, as in many cases, when it's telling us a number, it's really mainly concerned with the message that the number is meant to convey. And this is a point that Rav Joshua Berman who has made, I think, brilliantly, in other studies of Tanakh. But I just wanted to focus on one example that I think is interesting in Parshat Bamidbar and Parshat Naso. So in Parshat Bamidbar, we have this census of the people that's taken, where we have all the different Shvatim, all the different tribes that are going to be contributing soldiers to go to the army, that they're going to fight in the conquest of Eretz Yisrael. And so we're kind of amassing the troops and counting them with all the Shvatim. And Moshe is organizing all the people to do this. And when this happens, there are different numbers of troops given for each of the Shvatim. And I'm interested in one particular Shevet, which is Shevet Gad, because if you go through all the Shvatim, there's this whole passage of listing all the Nasim, which are the leaders of each of the tribes. So, for example, Livnei Yosef, Lephraim, Eli Shama ben Amihud, LeMenashe, Gamliel ben Pidatzur. So you have from Yosef of Ephraim, Eli Shama, the son of Amihud, and Menashe, for Menashe, Gamliel, the son of Pidatzur. So you have these Nasim, these leaders who are listed. And then it goes into listing the numbers of different, thousands of soldiers that were representing each of the Shvatim, and they all follow the same formula. So, for example, for Reuven, Pikudehem lemate Reuven, Shisha v'arba'im elef hamesh me'ot. So those that were counted of them, of the tribe of Reuven, there were 46,500, etc. And you go down through the tribes. So each of the Shvatim, there's some number basically in the tens of thousands plus some number of hundreds. Shimon is 59,300, and Yehuda is 74,600. All of them, with one exception, it's of that formula, tens of thousands of some number, and then some hundreds. But for Shevet Gad, it's different. It says, Pikudeim lemate Gad, Hamisha v'arba'im elef shesh me'ot v'hamishim. So those that were counted from the tribe of Gad were 45,650. So there's almost the same thing, but instead of being given tens of thousands and 100, we're giving tens of thousands and 100, and then in the tens, like another 50. So the number of significant digits is greater just for Shevet Gad, which is a bit of a puzzle, why that would be the case. If we're not, you could look at it one of two ways. Either certain tribes counted in exactly hundreds, and that was what they enrolled, or the Torah is just giving us an estimate or a sort of a count in units of hundreds, but then in either case, it's like, why is this one Shevet different? Either they're counting, they're enlisting a different number of people, or the count that the Torah is doing is somehow more precise in the case of Shevet Gad. And there are now different kinds of questions you could ask about why that is. There's one direction I don't want to go in, which I think is, I'll just say as an aside, because it's also an interesting one and very timely, because we just finished Sfirat HaOmer and Hag Shvuot. There's a way of reading this thing with Shevet Gad where you could say, okay, there is something quite distinctive in 45,650, because when you write that out, it's 45650, right? 40,000 and then 5,000 and then 600 and then 50. So 456 makes you think, okay, what's next after 456? What comes after 7, right? So 456 implies counting up to 7. And then the number 50, when you combine the number 50 with counting up to 7, you think, oh, okay, we just did that, right? We just counted 7 weeks of the Omer. And after 49 days, there was the 50th day, which was Hag Shvuot. And so there's this idea of counting up to 7, and then you get to 49, and then you have 50. And we have that in the Torah, both with Hag Shvuot and with Yovel. So that's being referenced there in this number. And then once you realize that, you say, oh, well, so okay, Sfirat HaOmer, what's that about? And Sfirat HaOmer is about the period between leaving Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, so this period of weeks after the initial exodus from Egypt, where the people are first entering the desert. And it's notable in that case, it's that when you look at this counting of the heads of everyone that's going on in Sefer Bamidbar, it says, Seu et rosh kol adad b'nei Yisrael lemishpechotam leveit avotam b'mispar shemot kol zachar legilgulotam. So take the census of all the people by their families and the house of their fathers according to their number of all the names, every male by their, and then gilgulotam is like their head or their skull or maybe a pole that you're taking. But it's interesting because the word gulgolet doesn't appear all over the place in the Torah, but one place that the word la gulgolet does appear is when the man is being given in the desert during this period after Yetziat Mitzrayim and before Matan Torah. זה הדבר אשר ציווה אדוני לקטו ממנו איש לפי אכלו עומר לגלגולת מספר נפשותיכם איש לאשר באוהלו תיקחו. So we have both Omer and Gulgolet. So Gulgolet is the word that goes back to this counting in Sefer Bamidbar, where we're getting this weird thing for Gad, the tribe of Gad. And also this is, at the time of the man being given, we're mentioning the Omer as the measure of the food that's being gathered. So Gulgolet means counting, and the counting of Gad, the counting of Shevet Gad reminded us of all this stuff to do with Sfirat HaOmer. And when we go to the man, we see a reference to the Omer, and also to this Gulgolet counting. And the funny thing on top of everything, and I would say have more of an explanation with this other than to observe these correlations, because as I said, this is an aside. But when the man is being given, it says, Ve'ku Beit Yisrael et shemo man, vehu kezera Gad, Lavan v'tamo ke'tzapichith bidvash. So the house of Israel called the name man, and it was like coriander seed, white, and its taste was like wafers made with honey. But this coriander seed thing is kezera Gad, like the seed of God. So the man is being called like the seed of God, and the man is also being measured in an omer, and the man is being distributed per gulgolet, per skull. And when we go over to counting gulgulot, Gilgulot in Sefer Bamidbar, when we get to the contribution from the tribe of God, which is the seed of God, right? There's this numerical thing of 4, 5, 6, 50. That's like counting up to 7 and 50 that references the idea of Sfirat HaOmer, which connect back to the whole idea of gathering the man in between Yetziat Mitzrayim and Matan Torah. So that is one brief example where I'm because I don't have a prepared further comment on this topic. I don't exactly have an explanation for why the Torah is making this very intricate weave there, but those two passages, I would argue, are quite connected by these different issues in the text that link them one to the other. Gad and counting, and Man and Omer and Sfirata Omer and Shvot and all of that, and the numbers. And the point is just that the number of soldiers fighting for Shevet Gad, you can't now look at that number and just say, oh, it so happened that every other Shevet had all round hundreds, but Gad had in the 50s. And otherwise, this number is just a dry fact that the Torah feels obligated to tell us because it's what happened, but it means nothing because the number is actually this fountain of connections to other passages that is saying, think about Sfirat Omer and think about the Man, etc., and connect that somehow with the counting of people and see what you make of it. So we're not going to make more of that right now because I actually just wanted to make a different point about the same number for Shevet Gad, where maybe there is more of a place to land on, and that's because in Parshat Naso now you have a second time that all of the princes, these Nisim, who were listed as being the leaders when you counted all the people for the soldiers to go to the army at the beginning of Bamidbar. Now, in later in Parshat Naso, you have this moment where all the Nisim are bringing their gifts to the Mishkan, and it's this famous instance where all the Nisim bring exactly the same gift. They're identical passages. Once it says who's bringing it, and it's Aminadav from Yehuda, or all these different, Nachshon ben Aminadav from Yehuda, and et cetera, all these different leaders. But once it states who the leader is in the Shevet, then they bring exactly the same cart of wealth and goods and animals and whatever to donate. But the order of the Shvatim is interesting in that passage. And we're not going to read the passage because it's a lengthy repetition of the same thing over and over again. But the question is, what is the order of the Shvatim, of the tribes when they bring these gifts? Because they're all bringing identical gifts. So the only thing that's left now is the order to play with. And it starts with Yehuda, and then actually goes down through all of Bnei Leah, all the sons of Leah. And then there's Gad. Shevet Gad appears next. And after Shevet Gad, all the sons of Rachel. Right? So you have, through Yosef, so you have Ephraim, Menashe, and Binyamin. That it was going to be Bnei Zilpa at the bottom, but Gad gets lifted, skyrocketed up to not the top, but the second to top layer after all of Bnei Leah. And I think because this is this moment where the Nisim are being mentioned again, the names of all these people, like we mentioned, Gamliel ben Petatzur, if I remember correctly, for Menashe, etc., all these different Nisim, all these different princes, this references back to the beginning of Sefer Bamidbar when we were mentioning them before. And so we can't help but say, well, okay, God stands out there because of these extra 50. And then here God stands out because the pattern is broken. And in both cases, it's with these princes. So there's something that's going on here where maybe one of these is the explanation for the other. And so I think there's just maybe actually at this point, a fairly brief point to make on that score, because what we can say is that each Shevet was being asked to give troops to go to fight to conquer the land of Israel. And the fact that this number, again, 45,650, 45,650, 456 that again makes you think counting up to 7, right? So now the idea, I don't want to talk about Sfirat HaOmer and all of that with the idea of counting up to 7. I just want to think of the idea of trying to get to 7. 4, 5, 6 means trying to get to 7. So we have 4, 5, 650. They were trying to get to 700, right? That God was so eager somehow to donate, to contribute, to bring their force of arms to help in the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, that they couldn't quite make it to 4, 5, past 4, 5, 650. But both the fact that they're being measured in 50s, like showing that they strained past 600, they were reaching for something higher. They were trying to get to 700. They were trying to get to 7, 4, 5, 6, 7. And they didn't quite make it. But the Torah is showing us the desire of God to give as many as it could to the shock troops of the hosts of Hashem to conquer Eretz Yisrael and defend Hashem's name and represent the people in this way that's obviously courageous and dangerous and all of that. And now you go over to this other moment when the contribution from each shevet is completely the same. And so it has to be just the thought that counts, right? Because no one gets to give more because they're being eager. But the eagerness that God showed, that Shevet God showed, that the tribe of God showed when they were trying to give their numbers to the army, and not everyone could give the same amount, even though they didn't give the most, their eagerness to give as much as they could is reflected over with the Nasiim where they're giving their gifts, because now God is lifted way up, not all the way to the top, but way up from the bottom to give the gift earlier than all these other Shvatim that has this place of honor. And I think, maybe all we need to say about that is that there are different ways in which we are given the opportunity to contribute and serve Hashem. And there are times when everyone's expected to give the same thing, and there are other times when everyone gives what they can, and some people have more to give, and some people have less to give. And it isn't always the one who gives the most necessarily that deserves the most honor, because it might be the one who's straining to give the most that he can, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees that. And the point is that there's a time and a place to give a place of honor to people who maybe have given the most, and maybe there's also a time and a place to give a place of honor to people who have given far above and beyond what could be expected of them, and then you see that they're straining to do that. And whether you're seeing this as a gesture by Moshe or by HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, it's presumably one that we should internalize and learn to imitate. Both that we should aspire to be like God and strain to give the most we can in our Avodat Hashem, and also that we should see when others are doing that and take every opportunity to give them a place of honor and recognize that.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.